Hello 10th and 11th graders. This lecture will cover the last section of information that both classes have to cover for the year. I know that makes your heart sing. All right. So our information in this chapter, or in this section, is on several different kinds of misplaced modifiers. Okay, different ways that they're misplaced. All right. There is a box on page 259 that gives a list of 10 different words that can modify other words. And these are very often misplaced describing words, okay? Adjectives and adverbs. So if you can look at that box, I'm not asking you to commit it to memory, but if you can look at it and kind of get it into your head so that when you see those words, especially on a test or when you're writing and you start to use one of those words, you're extra careful to make sure that the words are placed properly so that your writing has the meaning that you want it to have, okay? All right, so this first sentence says, at this time, Irish populations, especially who stayed near their villages, had little need for surnames, okay? Here, our problem is just the one word especially, and yes, it is in that box of 10 words that are commonly misplaced. All right, we could put especially in a couple of different places. We could put it at the beginning of the sentence and say, especially at this time, or we could put it after the prepositional phrase at this time. At this time, especially Irish populations. I kind of like it at the beginning better, but either one of those would be okay. Remember that these misplaced modifiers, things that describe other things, can be not only words, okay, and we have a lot of those that could be misplaced, but also they could be phrases or clauses, prepositional phrases, infinitive phrases, participial phrases, or even maybe a whole dependent clause, okay, that could be misplaced. All right, another example here. Before the 10th century, he discovered that the Irish did not begin using last names. Okay. It's not saying that he discovered this before the 10th century. What it's saying is he discovered that the Irish did not begin using last names before the 10th century. Okay, and if you had this sentence in context, it would help a little bit more, okay, to know exactly what it is and what it is not saying. Next slide, please. Okay, here we have, this next one is specifically two-way modifiers. In other words, a word that could describe a couple of different words. Usually it's sandwiched between two verb-like words, okay? And we're not sure which one it modifies, and therefore it's misplaced because your writing's not clear, so you got to move it to make your writing clear. Here's one way to do that. Here, I'll read you the incorrect sentence and then the correct one. In the 900s, the Irish population that was growing rapidly began expanding its prior boundaries. So, is it growing rapidly, or did it rapidly begin expanding? We don't know. So, here's one way to fix it. In the 900s, the rapidly growing Irish population began expanding its prior boundaries. All right. Another type of misplaced modifier is what we call a split infinitive. This is where we put a word or more than one word, perhaps even an entire phrase, or try to, in between the word to of the infinitive and the verb part of the infinitive. It's best if you can help it not to split your infinitive, not to put anything between the two and the verb part of your infinitive. Occasionally, and your book highlights this, and it would not hurt for you to look at this. Take a second. On page 2, I'm trying to see, the light's not good in here, sorry guys, 260. It highlights how occasionally it's better to split an infinitive than to unsplit it and make your sentence sound awkward. But generally, if we can, don't split an infinitive. Here's an example. Sousa began to, with great inspiration, write the tune to The Stars and Stripes Forever. Okay, to write here obviously is your infinitive. You've got a whole 3-word prepositional phrase in between the to and the right, and that's not ideal by any means, okay? Couple places you could move that prepositional phrase. You could put it at the beginning. With great inspiration, Sousa began to write the tune. Or you could say, Sousa began with great inspiration to write the tune. Either way, sounds good to me. Okay. Final thing we want to look here at, and this happens more often than you would think in writing, and the result can be confusing, unclear, downright funny if it's worded the wrong way. Okay. All right, a dangling modifier. This is usually a phrase, all right? Maybe a word, but often a phrase that comes at the beginning of your sentence more often than not. Again, it doesn't have to be at the beginning. Could be at the end. But a dangling modifier is a group of words usually that doesn't really describe anything. Remember, we've talked about how adjectives need to describe concrete nouns. Well, this is the case of an adjective phrase, usually, that does not. Okay? This is a participial phrase, this first one here. Born the third of 10 children, John Sousa's parents were of Iberian and Bavarian descent. Okay. The noun closest to this phrase at the beginning of the sentence is parents. His parents were not born the third of 10 children. What it's trying to say is John Sousa was born the third of 10 children. Okay. And so that's one way you could fix that. You could just say John Sousa was born the third of 10 children to parents of Iberian and Bavarian descent. Now, please note that with these dangling modifiers, unlike some of the others that we've discussed, with the dangling modifiers that don't really have a clear thing that they modify, you can't just move them, okay? Because there's nothing in the sentence that they really modify. So you can't just move it and put it closer to another word because it won't modify that other word either, okay? You have to rewrite with a dangling modifier. All right, one more slide. All right, here's one more example of a dangling modifier. And again, this is a participial phrase at the beginning of the sentence. Often these are, but not always by any means. Running against the wind, my jacket flapped wildly. Okay, your jacket wasn't running against the wind. And that's really the only noun there that participial phrase could describe. Okay, so obviously what it describes is not written in there, and so we have to do some rewording here, not just moving around. While I was running against the wind, my jacket flapped wildly. Okay, and make it your participial phrase into a dependent clause there, describing jacket now. Okay, as always, please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Have a blessed day.